Welcome back from lunch. Hope it was good for everyone. Hi, for those of you who are just joining us, I'm Elizabeth Thompson, the editor of the Nevada Independent, and I am very pleased to be moderating this panel on what we're calling K-16 education, which is all about high school to higher education pathways in Nevada. I'm joined by Nevada Independent reporter Jacob Solis, who is our higher education reporter. That is his beat in addition to the legislature. And I think that's a good thing because we'll probably be talking a little bit about what might or might not happen at the legislative session coming up in 2023. I'd like to introduce our panel, which I'm just so pleased, and thank you all so much for agreeing to be here. Dr. Pollard is the president of Nevada State College. Yes, but go ahead. You can clap. Remind us when you got here.
A little bit over a year ago.
Okay, so it's been, I thought it had been a year, I just wanted to make sure. Some of you may know our former governor, Brian Sandoval, who is now the president of UNR. And Mr. Ben Wynn is an award-winning high school teacher in Clark County, and he'll be talking. His perspective is going to be very valuable here, again, because this is high school to higher education pathways. So with that, Jacob, I'll let you go ahead.
Absolutely. Okay, well, if we're going to talk about sort of K through 16 pathways, one of the things that I think that's caught people's recent attention is concurrent enrollment, dual enrollment, whatever you want to call it. The idea that high school students can enroll in college while they're still in high school. And, I'm going to kick this to you, President Pollard, but President Sandoval and Mr. Wynn, feel free to jump in. But, what is the actual value of a high school student taking that kind of college curriculum while they're still in high school?
Well, the literature is fairly compelling about this, Jacob. It talks about the fact that early exposure to a college education is imperative for a student in order to really identify pathways there. It builds confidence, it helps them develop a sense of efficacy. It does deep work in helping them to understand what college learning is about, because it is very different than what they may see in a high school experience. But what I think is somewhat challenging about that, in my opinion, is that we can't see a dual credit or concurrent enrollment as this great panacea that's going to solve all the problems that we may have around that. We know that right now, Nevada is 46th in the country, depending on what ranking you look at, in terms of adults who have attained a college education. We know that we're seeing under-investment in higher education. We're also seeing, quite frankly, students disappearing who are graduating from high school and are not going to college. We don't know where they're going. So I think while dual credit and concurrent enrollment is an important part of our tool set, I think it would be particularly naive of us to think that that's going to significantly increase college-going rates if we don't put that within another set of tools to help us get to where we need to go in that space.
Okay, well then let's talk about some of those tools. So what else other than dual enrollment can, both, something like CCSD, but also higher education in Nevada be doing to make sure that, students in Nevada are going to college?
I love the way you phrase that, because I don't see it just as a higher education or a CCSD issue. To be quite frank about this is a community issue. Education is a community issue. So we need to be looking at all of the folks who are invested in that. Parents, community groups, social service agencies, all of us have a role to play in that. Quite frankly, the public as a whole has an investment in this. And we think that education is only about those who are participating in it or have children participating in it. That's short-sighted of us. It's actually fairly ignorant if we aren't thinking about the fact that all of us benefit from a well-educated community. So I think we have to do several things. Protect the pipeline, both in terms of students who are falling out of the system. We need to figure out how to keep them there. We have to protect also those who are doing the work in the classroom. The dirty secret that's coming out right now that we were bringing part of what I think is to put the quiet parts loud. We've created an environment where exceptional teaching can occur, but the reality about it is that many people are opting out because we have poor governance, we have underinvestment, we have underprepared students, we have the concurrence of multiple pandemics happening right now, whether that be around race, around COVID-19, opioids, mental health, and yet we wonder why teachers are tapping out. They're tapping out because we've created an environment where they aren't valued, and more importantly, they don't have the resources. And then the third thing is we had to start calling parents and families and communities to say, you know what, we have to be a part of this solution as well. You know, when I grew up, I'm born on the south side of Chicago. I went to school, but my tutoring was in my church. On the weekends, we had community folks who held competitions and mentored us and had events, took us into public service. Where are we at and how are we convening those spaces? So perhaps that's what CCSD and higher education should be doing, in my opinion, is serving more as conveners around these issues so that we can have a more robust set of solutions than simply thinking that dual credit and concurrent enrollment is going to solve all our problems.
Well, there's a lot to dig in there, but I do want to kick it to President Sandoval because, you know, when we talk about dual enrollment, especially in Las Vegas, UNR has been at the center of a pretty seismic shift insofar as UNR has entered the dual enrollment space in Clark County at all, right? So what is the University of Nevada, Reno doing in Las Vegas, President Sandoval?
Well, I think we need to back up. First, thank you for the opportunity to be here, Elizabeth, Jacob, Nevada, Indy. It really is a privilege and honor to be with President Pollard, be with Mr. Wynn in a great panel. But I think you need to go back a few years because this isn't a new idea. This is something that we established while I was governor. And we passed a law that allowed for dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, and the law provided that our community colleges, our colleges, and our universities would participate that. You know, President Pollard's right that we were one of the worst in the country with regard to college attainment. And so we, being the University of Nevada, Reno, have been interested in this and had a conversation with Superintendent Jara and said, what would you think about having 2 pilot UNR academies at 2 of our high schools in Clark County, Centennial and Cheyenne? We had this conversation the summer of 2021. We were able to put this all together in a very short amount of time. We hoped for a few hundred students. We had 700 students enroll. There's certainly plenty of capacity and plenty of students here in Clark County and a desire for that to happen. They were so successful that we were invited to come to 4 more high schools in Clark County, and we also added 2 charter schools. And so now we have almost 2,000 students here in Clark County. One of the testimonials that we have is from the former principal at Cheyenne High School, who said that his student, it's transformational for them. And now they're able to establish this confidence that they are college ready and that they can do college work. And these are students who likely otherwise would not have had this opportunity. I've personally visited several of the high schools where we're doing this, spoken with the teachers, spoken with the principals, met with the students. Their enthusiasm is overwhelming. So I think it's a great opportunity to introduce college-level work to high school students here in Clark County. I think it's going to be very beneficial to Nevada State College, very beneficial to College of Southern Nevada, very beneficial to UNLV. And so we need to increase the pipeline, not narrow it.
Okay, and I'll kick it to Elizabeth here in a moment because I want to get to Mr. Wynn and the teaching element of this, but I have to ask, certainly there's been a historic regional tension between the North and the South when it comes to higher education. And, you know, when UNR enters this space of dual enrollment, I know we were talking about dual enrollment as part of a toolbox, right? That's not just the only way that we get students into the pipeline to make sure that they go to college. But to what extent is this sort of regionalism impacting the way that institutions like UNR, like Nevada State College, actually go about the business of getting these students in these pipelines?
Are you asking me? So
you can start.
I think, you know, this regional tension thing needs to go away. It just needs to go away. Because we work all well together. President Pollard, President Zaragoza, President Whitfield, we all want the same thing, which is to benefit students. And as I said, there are 40 to 50,000 high school junior or seniors down here that we can all serve. So we come together and we now have a slogan between the University of Nevada, Reno and UNLV, #BetterTogether. Our faculties are working together, our researchers are working together, and now we're going to work together with regard to this concurrent enrollment. So again, I think most of that tension that you talk about is external, not internal, and we're going to continue to work together because at the end of the day, it's about serving students, and that's why we're here.
President Pollard, if you want to chime in.
I love Brian or President Sandoval's comments there, because I often think that when one crafts tensions or names tensions, it's often at the benefit of someone to do that. So the question I would have, who benefits when we say that there's a North and South divide? Who benefits when we say that we shouldn't have great opportunities for all students to attend higher education? I would offer to you that none of us benefit from that. So this idea of being very clear and deliberate and understanding, this is what we're trying to create. And one of the conversations we were having in the back is, do we have, as a state, a collective goal as it relates to higher education? Do we have a collective goal about what it takes to get there? Are we clear about what the implications are if we're to do that? So for me, I think I would even take the conversation back before. I don't believe I think binary oppositions very rarely serve us. But what I do think we need to have is, what is the shared goal that we're trying to get to? And if we can articulate that and then design plans around that, I think we're all better served when that occurs, which I would offer we have not done that sufficiently yet.
So before we switch topics, I'd actually like to hear from Mr. Wynn on this from a high school perspective. A lot was just said. What's on your mind?
So, excuse me. The pandemic certainly made a lot of challenges coming out, thinking about postgraduate opportunities for students. Many of my students, I teach in high school at Sunrise Mountain High School in the CT department. Whether it was the workforce or for post-secondary opportunities like college or maybe part-time schooling, for many of my students, if they can't visualize the path, and they cannot, for me at least as their teacher, narrate it to me, here's what I'm going to do after high school, it's very difficult for many of them, as they go through that, especially that first year of college, or first, if they're going to UNR, a few of my students, to wrestle with the challenges that they're going to face, whether it be the challenging courses that they're going to take. Myself, I teach automation technology, which next year our state's renaming to advanced manufacturing. There's been a lot of activity in this area of skilled labor, skilled trades that I think Nevada certainly as a state can perhaps take the lead on. And so as far as dual credit, there's a program called Jumpstart that I was informed about coming right out of the pandemic. And so they suggested to my school, Sunrise Mountain High School, would you be interested in hosting courses in partnership with different community colleges across the state. And so I worked with an engineering professor over at CSN to offer electrical technology, being that I teach a lot of electronics, wiring different systems in my own program. I spent 2 months in the summer preparing my curriculum, matching syllabi, matching examinations. And I want to say a week before school started, they told me, and this is coming from my own school, hey, sorry, we can't do this because we don't offer the math and English required courses for the Jumpstart dual credit program. And I can tell you I was bummed out. I was bummed out because no one told me this, one. I think two, I think about my career as a teacher as well. So much of what I've been trying to do in my profession is go look for opportunities. If they weren't in my building, I'd either make them there, find the people who wanted to partner me within the building, or I'd go outside my four walls and find other people across our state that want to build these sort of programs. And so I think that articulation between credits, working with teachers, there's a lot of nuts and bolts that come with building these programs, whether it be requirements of our teachers, what credentials they have, licensure, et cetera. I know that our state's doing a lot to make that easier. For myself to teach automation technology manufacturing, I was lucky enough to get grants, to pay for training, to get my licenses, to prove to our state, hey, I can teach this stuff, much less build a workforce that's coming and graduating in my program and going into the workforce or going to post-secondary schools and now going into the workforce as well and joining many of other great students coming out of all our schools here across the state. So there's a lot of work to be done. I look forward to seeing what we do in the future with these programs, but for me, it's including teachers. That's so important because we're that conduit. The students trust us. If we recommend a program, they'll give it that second, third look that they won't when they're scrolling down through all their feeds that they're now used to. So.
All right, thanks for that. And you gave me my segue into the question I was about to ask, so I think I'm going to give this question to you first. So you teach skilled labor trades, right? That we don't usually think of those words in the same sentence as higher education, right? When we think of like liberal arts, I think is where most people's heads go when we start talking about higher ed. So do you think, as a teacher and just as an adult resident of Nevada, does every high school student need to go to university, should go to university? How do you see it? How do your students see it?
So, this is every student has a story. Their family has that story of what brought them to America for some. Like myself, I'm a refugee from Hong Kong, Vietnam proper. Came here for freedom with my family, and we've been very fortunate. And then I had a public school education, which I think much of the ways it influenced me to do the things I do now. I think about my own students, and they tell their stories about why they are here, were born here, or they came with their family from elsewhere, and thinking about what are the markers of success that they see, whether it be role models, what they see in the movies, what they see on the news, etc., social media, I guess you could say in a way. For me, and thinking about higher education, or what does education mean? So what is the role of education? The verb, not the institution that I think many of us get muddied up in. And for me as a teacher, I sometimes try to shield them away from all the negativity that they'll see, especially with those that want to become teachers as well. I have to show them, like, hey, you can come to this job every day, you can smile, you can enjoy your work, you can enjoy working with your coworkers, your bosses, etc. You can have that life that you can look forward to in education. It's there. But for me, it's, okay, well, how do I make that happen? How does a student make it happen in their lives so they find success and happiness going through that path of maturation? College offers that. College offers this structure with which that they can see, okay, if I want this particular credential, this certification, accreditation, I have to take these courses, I have to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on the profession, for example, like in manufacturing, they need to have certain certificates and licensures to be able to work in our different Nevada employers. And so for me, how I see that, it's, okay, well, where are students turning to for influence for higher education, or would it be further education? A lot of it comes from either a parent, a relative, people that they trust, including their teachers. Some go far as back as their elementary school teachers that they still talk to, and they'll say, hey, Miss Smith, or hey, Mr. Smith, what should I do? Here's where I'm at in my life. Maybe I don't have the markers of a great academic record, but I want to do this. Just like my students who will go off into the workforce, go into construction, and later on say, hey, mister, I want to become an engineer, a design engineer. I want to become an architect. They've been exposed to things where they think, okay, well, what do I need to do now? So they enroll in a program, maybe 2 years at the community college, and transfer to a university or a degree that will give them more competitiveness in the workforce. Those are all things that I think we as a community need to, as Nevada, need to really discuss and debate. I'm open to whatever suggestions there are so that I can pass it on to my students. But I really think that is where Nevada can innovate. Because we don't need to play these ranking systems about being where we are on the scale, because there are certain things that we have as disadvantages and the challenges that we have to work with the budgets that we have, with the people that we have within the system, but also to create our own new workforce that wants to work in education, whether it be from K through 12 or beyond. And so we have a lot of work to do in that department. I think higher education is incredibly important, but we also need to articulate it in such a way that students can see the system not as K through 16, but whenever that they need to make that transition in their lives, that they can actually visualize the path and easily cross it with the financial support, with the social, emotional, with the mental health support. There's all these things that students are going through now, and with inflation, all these other things that I can bring up that I talk to my own students every day, literally about what they're going through at home, to tell them, hey, it's going to be okay. Just continue what you're doing, or hey, why don't you fix this? Or being in their lives beyond what the system says I'm in their lives for. 9 through 12, I'm a high school teacher, so sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We want to hear from you. That's why you're here. President Sandoval, for students who are thinking about college, is the value proposition of a university degree the same as it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago? Do you think so?
It depends, but first he's a rock star. So, University of Nevada is an original land-grant university. We're going to be celebrating our sesquicentennial in 2 short years. We're very excited about that. But we want to ensure that it is available and accessible to everyone. And working with our Board of Regents, we have what's called an affordable pricing policy that keeps tuition low so that it only increases with inflation to make it affordable. We just announced, or we just calculated that we've given out $182 million in financial aid to our students. And we're very grateful to our foundation that donates money to provide opportunities for our students.
Over what time period? The 182 million?
1 year.
1 year.
Yes. So in any event, I agree with Mr. Nguyen. I think all of us in higher education have to work together and make sure that all of the students know up front what their opportunities are, what they love to do, and where their skill set lies, and make that available to them on the campus. So to be a direct answer to your question, 100% I believe that higher education is important and is a good value for the students. But we want to make sure when they get there that they know what their course is, and so that they can immediately do that. So we bring students to our campus. We call it Nevada Bound. We tour them around campus. We introduce them to the professors, to the colleges that they're interested, so that they can make informed decisions.
Thanks.
So I struggle with your question. You probably saw me when you first brought it up, because I reject the premise that education is not valuable. I reject the premise that higher education, the value proposition is one that's negative right now. I have yet to see us stop talking about the exceptions and have us start talking about the rules. I struggle, and I'm using I statements. My therapist a long time ago taught me you should use I statements, right? I struggle because when I hear that phrase about the value proposition of higher education and whether or not everyone needs that, in the back of my head, all I keep thinking about is, who are they talking about?
Well, one group I'm talking about, if I may, because I am very interested in your specific answer. So we're all aware, President Biden, very much in the news the past few weeks, talking about student loan forgiveness. And this has started a national dialogue about how expensive is higher education. Is it really worth it? Is putting myself, so UNR students don't put themselves $200,000 in debt, but many students who attend college do put themselves in that kind of debt. So that's kind of where I was going with it, is that, can a student feel in Nevada's university system that whatever loans I've taken, however much I've expended to be here, I can be fairly certain that in my life ahead, I'm not going to regret it.
As someone who will pay back student loans until the day I stop working, I know for a fact that that investment changed my life. I know that in the state of Nevada, the vast majority of adults do not have a college degree. I know that that impedes us to be thinking about diversification of our economy. I moved here from a different state, and I sat at the table with a lot of large corporations who were in the midst of making decisions about where to place their companies. And the number one question that was asked before they talked about economic incentive packages, after they talked about land, they wanted to talk about the talent pipeline, inevitably. And this one particular company that we sat with, very large, multi-global company that owns almost everything in the world, it seems like, they were very specific about why they were choosing to relocate to the area I was in. And they said they did this because it was very clear that this community valued education and that they're both from the K-12 through higher education. Yes, there are many adults who will graduate or not complete college with student debt. There's no doubt about that. There are many who question the value of having made decisions along the way that then has them leaving with so much debt. But let's talk about what really happens when one has a college degree. If you have an associate's degree, your lifetime earnings is over $800,000 more. If you have a baccalaureate degree, it's $1.2 million more in lifetime earning. That only exceeds if you have professional degrees and graduate degrees. That's what the data tell us. We know that there are large numbers of folks who have student debt. We need to be talking about the pathways and the decision-making that went there. Should certain students have made a decision to attain an associate's degree before they went to the baccalaureate degree? Should they have stayed local versus going away? Should they have been exposed to dual credit or concurrent enrollment programs prior to that graduate? Have no doubt about that. But what I do believe at the core of who I am and what I've seen as a lifetime educator is education, and higher education specifically, is life-changing and defining for families. It's the only thing I know that will take a family out of poverty and give them economic mobility. So yes, there are some trade-offs in that. Should higher education look at making and how we can be more effective and efficient with our costs? No doubt. Should we be thinking about the ways in which we help parents and students make decisions about college? No doubt. But I have to believe I wouldn't be sitting here, wouldn't be in this job if I didn't believe that higher education had a purpose.
President Sandoval, I sense that you have a thought.
No, and I just want to support what President Pollard's saying, but I think I can speak for my friend Keith Whitfield, the president of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We have two great universities in this state. They are both Carnegie high research R1 universities at a great value. And going back to concurrent enrollment, Jacob, students can get up to a year's worth of college done while they're in high school. So there's an incredible value proposition there, is to get that college credit while they're in Mr. Wynn's class, hopefully someday, and then come and be able to graduate in 3 years and attend two of the top research universities in the country at a fraction of what it might cost at some of those private universities that you referred to.
Or they could stay and go to a community college or go to their state college of Nevada State, where 80% of our graduates stay local. So I think there is, again, options, and telling students about what those options are, laying that out for them and their families to make those decisions. Oh, and don't forget, the vast majority of students who are actually enrolled in higher education are not 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They're 26, 27, 40, 45 who are trying to redefine themselves. That's the other part of the narrative that nobody talks about.
Well, I can follow up on that, and because I did want to talk about sort of access and who gets to go to college. And when we're talking about non-traditional students, one thing that doesn't come up as often as maybe tuition does is the impact of all the other costs that go into having to live while you're working less or not working at all. And really, it's the cost of living. And I think of Reno in particular, but Las Vegas is not a ton better. So, what is the impact of just the economy, right? We're looking at skyrocketing inflation, skyrocketing home and rent prices, right? And we've seen a commensurate decrease in enrollment, right? And for the first time in a long time, universities and colleges in Nevada are struggling to grow their enrollment. And so what is really the impact of these sort of exterior economic forces on the people who historically have been denied access to higher education?
I would offer to you, in these historic times, Nevada State continues to be the institution in the state of Nevada that has seen enrollment growth. And it is because we're doing, I think, several important things with that. There will be some contraction, I have no doubt, as a result of COVID-19 in this moment that we're in with the economy. But students are choosing our institution for a very specific reason. One is that we don't have all the frills that are wrapped around that. It is about phenomenal teaching. It is about robust support services, and it's about seeing students where they are and allowing them to attend college in a very deliberate way, locally, with people who look like them, in environments that respond to them, and very clearly with the mission of having them be able to stay in the community of which they are a part of. For us, we know that there's an exceptional value. So for every dollar, give or take, that's invested in our phenomenal R1 institutions, our institution receives anywhere from 60 to 70 cents of that. We know that that's important because we're able to deliver a value to our students. We're able to do that because we see them where they are. But I think all of us would say, whether it be K-12 or the higher educational system, there has to be more investment made in that system. If we want different outcomes, we're going to have to do that. But recognizing also the complexity of our students' lives. This is where private philanthropy needs to come in. Emergency funds are critical for students right now. You're making a choice between paying tuition, paying a car note, or feeding your family or housing yourself. You're going to make some different ideas here. The last point I'll make about this is that we have to be very thoughtful about whose today's college students are. There's a trope in many of our heads that the education, those who attend college are 18 or 19 years old. Mom and dad are sending them off and sending them care packages. They're going to go to spring break in Cancun. They're going to have an internship in the summer at mom or dad's friend's country club. That's not who's going to college. The vast majority of college students are over the age of 24. The vast majority of them are first-generation college students, and the vast majority of them are students of color. So how are we intentionally designing and redesigning systems that meet them where they are and recognize the complexity of their lived experience? Until we acknowledge that, we're going to continue to recreate the systems that produce the outcomes that we have right now.
President Sandoval, if you want to chime in.
Of course, and there are a lot of layers to your question, so I think we could talk about this for a very long time. But for us, our enrollment is flat, so we have about 100 students less than we did a year ago. Interestingly, at least in Washoe County, there are less high school seniors than there were 4 years ago. We are proud that our incoming class this fall is the most diverse that we've ever had. 50% of them come from diverse backgrounds, which we're very pleased about. The pandemic obviously had effect as well. Many students weren't able to continue because they needed to go home and help their families. For us also, interestingly, back to your regional thing, half of our students come from Clark County. Half of the incoming students in our incoming class are from Clark County. But I talked about that financial aid. We have what's called the Nevada Guarantee Program. So if you have a Pell eligible student, we assure that they will be able to attend the University of Nevada, Reno, and that their tuition and fees will be covered. That's a program that's been very beneficial to our students. But again, I love to continue to agree with my colleague, President Pollard. We have to make sure that we provide that ladder or that gate, however you want to term it, to make higher ed available to people, to students, individuals from wherever background that they come from, whatever age they come from, and make sure that it's available to them so that we can continue to develop the workforce for the state of Nevada.
Okay, well, I want to follow up on the high school angle of this too, because I'm curious from your perspective, the process of going to college and getting scholarships, if you're Pell eligible, it becomes this Byzantine labyrinth of forms and forms and forms that if you're a high schooler, you've never interacted with in your life. And so now you've got to figure out how to navigate the system. Your parents, if you're a first generation student, might not be familiar with that system. And so you're relying on the infrastructure of, say, a school, teachers, counselors, to help you through that process. From your vantage point inside the schools, do you think that students are getting the help they need to make sure that they're getting as much money as they can, that they're being able to afford college once they get there?
Yeah, there's no doubt that in our school system, we have an inundation of resources for students, especially in digital libraries, resources. There's everything in their phones now, smart computers, where I joke with my students, back then when we wanted to have fun, we would doodle or read books, instead of what they do a lot when their free time is surf the web and be exposed to all these different things. When they look at opportunities in higher education, they see these large, beautiful posters from different universities, all advertising, marketing what they do. And for many of them, if they can't see themselves there physically or mentally, or they don't have a connection there. I have students, for example, that go to institutions based on having someone in their family that's gone there, or someone of their friend group that's gone there, someone that they can navigate that process, especially many of my students are the first generation that will go to college in their families. I teach a majority North and East Las Vegas students over in Sunrise Mountain. And specific about our communities, we're a comprehensive high school, meaning we don't have any magnet programs. We don't have any distinct programs that pull students from different neighborhoods. For me, specifically, why I decided to stay at my school, it's my 9th year now as a teacher there. For me, and looking at the profession of teaching, what do we do, educators, including our support staff, that we all are this family, is that we're working with the students that we have to build them into the better human beings that they can be, realizing that, and it's funny, I teach robotics and manufacturing, all this machinery, and yet I realize what's going to make the system better isn't more innovation necessarily in the sense of technology, because technology is an accelerator. But it's more of how do we negotiate that process and help and guide and lift our students up wherever they're at in a way that they can understand. And I say this because many of my students who are tested like crazy K through 12, from all through elementary school, middle schools, maybe they're tracked in certain ways into certain programs, or when I'm recruiting to middle schools and then I meet some excellent students at robotics competitions or STEM competitions and I try to bring them to my school, but mom and dad applies to a magnet program instead and then off they go somewhere else. To me, it's okay, well, how do I, as a professional, further my ability to guide the students that I do have, the students that I'm linked up with in different programs from across the state, in a way that they can come to me as a resource. It's kind of like going to a doctor or an attorney or whatever it may be for advice. Me, the teacher, finding the resources that I can point to and say, hey, here's who you can go to. I think for many of us teachers, it's alumni that are now into the system, now with Zoom and all this virtual stuff. A lot of them are very used to just pulling up their phones and saying, hey, here's me on the job, working at wherever they may be working at. And for a lot of my students, when they can see another student just like them doing that type of work, especially those that are not maybe as academically proficient, but also still succeeding, for them, that's that reminder, like, hey, I can have a 2.0 GPA and I can still work at Tesla. Why? Because I have the licenses, I have the work ethic, I have the story that they can articulate with confidence of why it is that they struggled academically in their lives, why they had to work after school, why they can't stay for after school programs and do sports. They had to help feed their family. Some of them have to grow up very quickly because of tragedy that occurs, especially in North Las Vegas for many of my students who have a lot of things that they deal with. And as we build that trust between the adult and the child, that they reveal to us and say, hey, I need help, or hey, what can I do about this? For me, in thinking about those pathways, it's taking into account all of that. Like, that to me is what education for a teacher is realizing, hey, here's the individual, here's what I understand about them, and here's how I can help that particular individual student raise themselves up. Their peers are looking at them, not at me, and then they get inspired to go out and do the same thing. Like, that to me is so true to the human experience, like why we do the things we do, what motivates society to do things. It's storytelling. I can give them all the statistics that I want. You'll make more money, you just gotta do checklist off all these boxes, but for a lot of kids, it's like, that's cool, but if I can't see myself doing that, I can't see myself, someone else in my background doing that, is it really gonna happen? And a lot of them, it's like, it takes time to trust the system, to trust the adults. Hopefully the adults trust themselves to do the good work that's necessary. And I think for myself, speaking as a teacher as well, it's like, there's a lot of, and I hate to say this, a negativity from those outside the profession, those within. I think myself, so as a young teacher, how the heck am I going to convince people to want to join this profession if I myself don't love my work and talk about the positives and the ways that it can be better? And I think more importantly, as a professional, do the things that will make it better, to speak, to raise my voice in ways that are productive, and to connect with people in the community that actually want it to be better and not just create an impression of what excellence looks like. Because there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And innovating in education, for me, it's all about the practice of it, the doing of education that we need to resolve as a society. Otherwise, we're not going to last 10, 20 years with this current system as far as K through 12, because we don't have enough people, we don't have enough, a lot of things. So anyways, there's a lot to work on, but I'm excited to be a part of this here in the state of Nevada.
Awesome.
So I want to, I think I heard the word pandemic come up about 10 minutes ago, but I do want to ask a question. So we all know there was learning loss during the pandemic. I think it was impossible to avoid that, right? Just for so many different reasons. Students were not able to engage at the same level that they had been in their education, whether in college or in high school, I think. What's going on at either of your two institutions or at others around the state to address, I guess this is a two-part question. Number one, to address the learning loss that we know just happened. And number two, has that, I assume it's made it even harder, it's complicated the co-requisite remediation approach at the college and university level too, right? Because the remediation program, for those of you, do you want to explain it, Jacob? Because you actually did write an explainer on this. Go ahead. Tell everybody what co-requisite remediation is.
Yeah, at College in Nevada, just for anyone who doesn't know, there aren't any remedial classes anymore. Remediation is handled in regular college level classes through additional supports, and that's co-requisite. It's a system-wide initiative, and it's now officially in place. And so just in time for COVID, we've sort of moved away from old style remediation for a host of reasons. We can get into that. But I guess to Elizabeth's questions, right? Really, what's the impact of COVID been on the actual academic side for these high school students who are coming into this college experience for the first time?
And it's been hard on everybody. And it's been hard on our students. They went from being in class to not being in class at all and doing everything over Zoom. It's been hard on them when we went into the high flex, and there was a combination of the two, and you have the social distancing. And as you said, the learning loss that occurred, many of them, this was a completely different culture for them. I also got to speak on behalf of the faculty. It was hard on them as well to adapt, and this was a pivot that literally took place within a week when everything shut down. So under the circumstances, I think our faculty did everything that they could possibly do to maintain a quality education experience for our students. And I think we are just starting to get back in that rhythm this fall because obviously everybody is on campus, present, no social distancing, and moving forward. And I think the amount of enthusiasm that I see on campus has been incredible, and the students are very happy to be back in class, to be able to have those working groups that they have in working together. I know I'm going to go back to the concurrent enrollment, and you talked about the co-rec, but that is another opportunity to take math and take English college level. There is no difference between that course on their high school campus and that which it would be at the University of Nevada, Reno. And they can learn and do college level work while they're on campus and learn from their trusted faculty. You've heard Mr. Wynn talk about trust multiple times, and that's why I think it's great that we have great faculty to do that.
Is enrollment in those courses you just referred to on the university side, is it up? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I'm not expecting an exact number, but
I can check. I don't know. Enrollment in
their co-remediation, all the classes you just mentioned, right? The ones where, okay, maybe we didn't get everything we should have got our senior year, but hey, good news, we have a chance now to get it at UNR. I'm wondering if the numbers are up.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but I do want to make an interesting comment, because when we visited one of the concurrent enrollment high schools, we had some legislators with us. And it was a pretty poignant remark, because they said, higher ed had always complained that we were getting students from the school districts that weren't college ready, yet we hadn't done anything about it. And now is a direct effort to go into the high schools and provide those college level courses so those students can start doing that work while they're there. So that, as I said, there are a combination of things. I apologize, I don't know that number off the top of my head. But
I didn't expect you to know the exact answer, but you can get back to Jacob on Monday.
I think that the pandemic is only revealing the things that we already knew were happening. I believe that there is a long-term effect of the pandemic that we won't see yet for another 3 to 5 years. And I think it's more tragically affecting younger students than what we may have seen at the college level. Because of the amount of learning that occurs early, and not just the learning about the academic discipline or subject the student is learning about, it's about the infrastructure, the architecture of the educational system that they have not had exposure to. So I think that is going to be a significant issue. I also believe for us in higher education, we're thinking about how to redesign. We were talking earlier, I think I finally crossed over now where I've been an administrator longer than I was a classroom teacher. And I cannot imagine having to step back into the classroom now with students whose exposure and trauma as it relates to what they experienced in the pandemic we can't imagine what that is like for them to bring it into the classroom with them. So I mentioned earlier, you picked up the pandemic. This COVID-19 pandemic was an intersection of multiple pandemics that occurred. As a nation, we were grappling with COVID-19. We were dealing with a racial reckoning in this country that we have yet to finish dealing with. We were dealing with a mental health crisis that is only more exacerbated now because of these first three. Oh, and by the way, we also were still grappling with an opioid reality that none of us were sitting prepared to deal with. So now we're watching that happen in the classroom, both with students and faculty, as you just mentioned. I even say administrators, those of us who are in leadership. I'm a different leader than I was prior to this moment. And I have a greater sense of urgency about this. And I think that we're going to have to spend some time thinking as a society, both locally but also writ large, are we prepared for what this is going to reveal to us in several years? And that I don't necessarily know if we're spending the time. So right now, we're grappling with the crisis. We have yet not started thinking about the long-term strategies to really address what has happened over the last 3 years as a country, as a globe.
Sounds like a topic for Indyfest in 5 years.
There you go. What do we know now that we wish we'd known then?
So I did want to follow up on that answer and ask about sort of the classroom level view of COVID, right? Because now you're starting to see students enter high school who had to deal with remote learning while they were in middle school. And sort of, you know, from what you're seeing with your students, has that set them back? And I mean, has it? You know, what's really the impact that you're seeing in the classroom?
Wow, that's a big question, because I think, you know, for us teachers who've been in our schools for a very long time, we can look at our past data and look at, okay, well, here's how students were performing on this unit, and look at it from a sort of examination by examination basis. But for me, it's okay looking at, well, how my students are showing up to my class. When are they showing up at all? Right now with challenges around, you know, bus drivers, getting students there on time, bus driver safety, and encouraging more folks who want to take children from across our state to their schools and then safely back home, and parents having to worry about that. There's a lot of challenges brought up by it, logistically, academically. I think for me, in the 2 years that we had as a pandemic, and I remember in 2020 when we got all excited about field trips and all this stuff, at the end of my course for my students who want to go see some local businesses in manufacturing and say, hey, you know, I can do this in Las Vegas, Nevada, or up north in Reno with all these, you know, companies that are building amazing factories. That all got cut short. And here we are doing our culminating experiences in my program, where a lot of them are, I have a CTE program, so we're doing hands-on work. They're building projects. They're doing things. For example, students are building things for their homes. Family members that are requesting whatever it may be and maybe adding some electronics to it, and they can showcase that and get class credit for it. A lot of that had to go to the wayside. And so we went to virtual. I used simulation, VR, all these, how do you could say, symbolic forms of learning that I think are helpful in certain contexts, especially for certain learners that may require that additional modem of input. But for many of my students, they sorely missed that connection with me, their teacher. And whether it be like internet problems at home, they couldn't see my video, or it was laggy or slow. So whenever I try to teach like a software application and they look at my mouse strokes and where to click or where to do things, it's all blurry to them. And so now I have to call them separately, work with them, and you know, it's a lot of work for us as the teacher, right, to work with our students. But that led to slowly this sense of apathy about, well, does the system truly care about me, the student? And I recognize that teachers in and of themselves, we have so many things that we have to do that are on our plates. Our students require so much to believe in the system, more than I think when I was a kid, because there were way less distractions than there were now. I knew many students that were just tuned out. They would leave the feed going and they pretend they're in the classroom and they turn in their work and they play the game of school. To me, the importance is their education. Are they learning? What can they do? Not how necessarily they fit within the system and their rankings, which I think for certain students and families, that's important. For students that I teach, honestly, for them, it's like, okay, where am I at in my life now? Where am I headed? What are my opportunities? And for my students, and I recognize their GPA, is like I don't have the cream of the crop students that I used to have when I was teaching AP Physics. I have the students that generally, well, they're the ones that I get, right? I look at where they're at and I think to myself, okay, well, if I was this student, what would I do? I sit down, I hear their thoughts, and I go back and forth with them and say, okay, well, we're post-pandemic, maybe your freshman or sophomore grades were not so hot, but here are the opportunities you have at our school, for example, to do credit retrieval, to take certain courses that may boost your GPA if you're looking to academic programs. Or maybe you could do a lot of my students do. They go out in the workforce, they go to the community college system, and they matriculate to other colleges that may have a program that they're interested in. And that way they can sort of, how do you say, save their academic record. But more important to me is that they grow as scholars, as young thinkers, that they can look towards the future in ways that make sense. But again, the challenge, the confusion is, okay, they're navigating financial issues, they're navigating the increased cost of living. And so the path to completion of degrees, like I had a few students finish their engineering degrees, a lot of them is 6-7 years to finish what would, when I was in school, 4-year degree programs. And I recognize that's the unique circumstances that we're living and dealing with as a Nevada education system. To me, it's almost like that's the opportunity, though. Is that not the nature of living in America now, where, you know, the dollars of old no longer go as far, and now we have to be more creative. We have to, you know, innovate in the way we live our lives and work with the people that we have in our lives to make that better. Whether we have an uncle or an aunt or mother, father that have those resources available, a tutor, if you will, or we have our teachers that we depend and love and trust that can help us get there. I think it requires all of that. But as a community, to even if it's just the impression of it, give our young people the impression that they can go to this resource, go to this organization, this cluster, this Nevada higher education system, and say, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm going to throw my stuff in a system, and it's going to tell me here's what you need to do. And now they can see it. And if they drop off, from here, maybe they could take this class over to this university or that school, which is what a lot of my kids do to finish their remedial courses. Is they'll go to CSN, they'll go to UNLV, or they'll go to local community colleges, TMCC up north with UNR. And so there's a lot of opportunities for kids to craft their own stories. But I think for many of them, it's like, how do they figure this out naturally? Well, they find great information. They find trusted adults that will help guide them through that process so they can tell their parents, hey, here's what I'm going to do, and I want to see it through. And so anyways, that's sort of how I see it as far as navigating out the pandemic, is working within those unique situations that many of our students are going through here.
Thank you for that. I'm sure President Sandoval agrees that we should probably try to clone Mr. Wynn if we could and throw about 2,000 of him at the school system. Okay, we're down to about 4 minutes. I've got a final question. It's a big one, but not a new one. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Pollard. You said near the beginning of this panel, you were listing the broader issues as you saw them with higher ed, and you used the phrase poor governance. So I would like to ask you a two-part question. Should the Board of Regents be brought under the control of the legislature? And are there governance structure changes that would make your operations more efficient, whether that happens or not?
So I defer on the issue of the governance. It's not my decision to be made. I know as a voter, I will be deeply engaged in watching how the debate goes on the issue, very clearly on that, and analyzing it. I have had the privilege of working in 4 other states, so I have very sharp attention to how the model works in different places, both its strengths and its weaknesses, and there are gives and takes in all of that. I think the idea of local control is a very important one, but I also believe very deeply in the belief that you have to be completely and thoughtfully prepared for the work that you're going to step into. So I believe that very, very much. I'll also say that there's an opportunity, and I think the positioning of this question also suggests to us, are there other models that we should be looking at? I don't necessarily know if there's an either-or conversation to say, should they be here or should they be there? Perhaps Nevada could be on the forefront of offering a completely different model of how we think about governance in this, and as it relates to higher education. And I would say the same thing for a K-12 space. We have to be very deliberate about what good governance looks like, how we define it, how we teach it, how we hold people accountable for it, how we professionally develop them when they step into these roles, and most importantly, at the end of the day, how do we make sure that we're all talking about education and education of today's students? One of the things I don't think we do is we need to put students back at the center of the conversation and not make it about our lived experiences or even necessarily the organizations. It's about the students that we're charged to take care of.
President Sandoval, I'm really interested to hear your answer on this question, because you've been a high school student in this state, you've been a college student in this state, you pursued higher education, you've lived and worked here professionally as a result of that education. You are the governor of our state who oversaw the very topic I'm asking you about, and you are now a university president. What needs to change with higher education governance, if anything?
Well, let me answer your first question that you asked Dr. Pollard. My response would be an emphatic no. I think our Board of Regents has the ability to properly govern and give guidance to each of the presidents in our system of higher education. They're currently going under a self-imposed review right now to see how they can do things better and perhaps do some visioning statements. Our acting chancellor, I think, is the right person at the right time, Dale Urquiaga, Chancellor Urquiaga, to help guide them through this process. There definitely is some fine-tuning that needs to be done and some visioning and instruction to each of the presidents in terms of more specific goals, but I think the system is good as how it is.
Can you name some things? I'm sure I don't know when the last time you spoke to Mr. Urquiaga was, and feel free to say, but can you name one specific thing that has been brought to light since he came on board that you think we need to be talking more about? And this will be our last.
Yeah, no, there's 15 seconds, but I think it's too soon. He's getting his arms around things, and he is systematically talking to all the right people and will be providing his guidance. So I don't think there's one specific thing I could respond to you on.
Okay, well, maybe we'll invite him next time and see what he has to say. All right, thank you all so much. I think a round of applause is probably in order for this conversation. It was great. Really appreciate your time. Next up, this is a pre-taped panel because one of the gentlemen was not able to be there live. Should we have open primaries in Nevada? Should we have ranked choice voting? What is it? Well, it's going to be on your ballot, question 3 in November. So next up, 2 very vibrant and talented and persuasive, you can be the judge of that, attorneys argue this out with me and John, so stay tuned for that.